When my parents said, "You can't afford college. Let your sister go instead," I took a loan and worked 3 jobs. Years later, I bought the university's research lab. At the awards ceremony, I shook hands with the dean. My parents stood in the crowd, speechless. I was scrubbing the kitchen floor when I overheard it. My father's voice, low and deliberate, floated in from the dining room. "She'll have to stay back. We can't afford both." I froze, sponge in hand, my knees aching against the cold tiles. I wasn't supposed to hear that. But I did. And it changed everything. I stood up slowly, walked into the room and saw them sitting around the table. My mother's eyes darted toward me, then away. My sister, younger by 2 years, was still humming, spooning lentils into her bowl. My father didn't flinch. He looked at me, then back at his plate. "It's decided," he said. "You'll stay. Let your sister go." No discussion. No apology. Just a verdict. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat tightened, but I refused to let tears show. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. The chipped edge of the table dug into my wrist. I stared at the steam rising from my untouched bowl. My mother reached for the salt, her hand trembling slightly. No one looked me in the eye. After dinner, I walked to my room without a word. The hallway felt longer than usual. I passed the family photos. Birthdays, weddings, school awards. My face was in all of them, smiling. I wondered if they ever saw me beyond those frames. Inside my room, I locked the door and sat on the edge of my bed. The ceiling fan spun slowly, creaking with each turn. I lay back, arms stretched out, staring at the blades. My mind raced. I had spent years dreaming of college, of lab coats and microscopes, of discovering something that mattered. I had imagined walking across a stage, diploma in hand, my parents cheering. That dream now felt like a cruel joke. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there, replaying their words. "You'll stay." Like I was a piece of luggage. Like I didn't matter. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't plead. I'd find a way. Even if it meant walking alone. The next morning, I skipped breakfast. I walked to the nearest bank, a 15-minute trek in the heat. My shoes pinched my toes, but I didn't care. I filled out the loan application, hands shaking slightly. The clerk glanced at me, then at the form. "You'll need a cosigner," he said. I nodded, knowing I didn't have one. Rejected. I tried again the next day. And the next. Each time the answer was the same. No credit history. No collateral. No cosigner. I felt like I was knocking on a door that would never open. On the 4th try, I walked into a small branch tucked between a pharmacy and a bakery. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon. I handed my form to the clerk, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a name tag that read Mr. Patel. He looked at me, then at the form. "You're applying alone?" he asked gently. I nodded. "I just need enough to cover tuition. I'll work. I'll pay it back." He studied me for a moment, then leaned forward. "Tell me why." I hesitated, then spoke. "Because I want to be a scientist. Because I don't want to disappear." He didn't smile. He didn't pity me. He just nodded. "Wait here." He walked into the back office. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at the posters on the wall. Smiling families, happy graduates. After 20 minutes, he returned with a folder. "It's not much," he said. "But it's a start." I took the papers with trembling hands. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded. "Don't waste it." I didn't. I found 3 jobs within a week. I cleaned hospital floors at dawn, the smell of disinfectant clinging to my clothes. I served coffee till noon, memorizing orders and smiling through exhaustion. In the evenings, I tutored neighborhood kids in math and science. My backpack was torn at the seams, held together with safety pins. I slept 4 hours a night, sometimes less. I didn't tell my parents. They didn't ask. My sister got her acceptance letter a week later. They celebrated with cake. I watched from the hallway, unseen. The day college started, I had $12 in my pocket. I wore a second-hand shirt, ironed carefully the night before. I arrived early, clutching my schedule like a lifeline. The campus buzzed with energy. Groups laughing, professors walking briskly, flyers fluttering on bulletin boards. During lunch, I sat alone under a tree pretending to read. My stomach growled, but I ignored it. A girl walked by, paused, then sat beside me. She opened her lunchbox, pulled out a sandwich and offered me half. I blinked. "Are you sure?" She smiled. You look like you could use it. I took it, hands trembling slightly. Thank you. I'm Priya, she said. I nodded. I paused. Just someone trying to make it. She didn't ask questions. She didn't pry. She just sat with me, sharing stories about her classes, her annoying roommate, her love for astronomy. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. That small act of kindness reminded me, I wasn't invisible. I mattered. Even if my parents couldn't see it. Even if the world tried to dim my light. I was here. And I wasn't going anywhere. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter. One built not on privilege but on grit. Not on approval but on purpose. I didn't know what lay ahead. But I knew one thing, I would never let anyone decide my worth again. Priya's half sandwich had long been digested, but her kindness lingered. I carried it with me into every lecture, every lab, every late night spent hunched over borrowed textbooks. I didn't have the luxury of ease, but I had something stronger, resolve. Dr. Langley was the kind of professor who wore his disdain like a tailored coat. He didn't hide it. You lack academic polish, he told me during our first lab meeting, eyes scanning my thrift store notebook as if it offended him. I nodded, said nothing. I wasn't there to charm him. I was there to learn. I stayed late in his lab long after others had packed up. I cleaned beakers, labeled samples, and took notes on procedures I wasn't even assigned. One evening, I attempted a synthesis experiment I'd read about in a journal. I followed every step, double-checked every measurement. But something went wrong. A sharp pop echoed through the lab, followed by the sound of glass shattering. I froze, heart pounding. Dr. Langley stormed in, his face tight with anger. "What did you do?" he barked. "I was testing a reaction," I said quietly. He looked at the mess, then at me. "Reckless. This is why you don't belong here." I didn't argue. I grabbed the broom and swept up the shards. My hands trembled, but I didn't let him see. That night I walked home with a cut on my palm and a fire in my chest. I had failed. But I had learned. The next morning I skipped breakfast and went straight to the library. There was a corner on the third floor tucked behind the archives where no one ever sat. It smelled like old paper and dust. I made it my sanctuary. I read journals, dissected research papers, and scribbled notes in the margins of donated textbooks. I started writing my own papers. Hypotheses, observations, ideas. No one asked for them. No one knew they existed. But I wrote anyway. One afternoon, a visiting researcher from another university wandered into my corner. He picked up a paper I had left on the table and skimmed it. Then he looked at me. "Who wrote this?" he asked. "I did," I said, unsure whether to be proud or embarrassed. He smiled. "You've got something here." That was the first time someone saw me, not as a poor student or a charity case but as a thinker. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up revising the paper, adding citations, refining the language. I submitted it to a student journal the next morning. It was published 2 weeks later. Priya found out and hugged me so tightly I nearly dropped my backpack. "You're brilliant," she said. "They should be begging you to stay." I laughed. "They're not." She tilted her head. "Not yet." A month later I was called into the dean's office. I thought I was in trouble. Instead he handed me a letter. "Congratulations," he said. "You've been awarded the university's research scholarship." I stared at the envelope, confused. "I didn't apply." He smiled. "Someone did on your behalf." I knew instantly. Priya. The ceremony was held in the auditorium. I wore the same second-hand shirt from my first day. When they called my name I walked to the stage, heart thudding. I scanned the crowd. My parents weren't there. But Priya was. She clapped louder than anyone. After the ceremony, I was offered a part-time job in the university's research lab. It wasn't glamorous. I cleaned equipment, organized samples, and fetched supplies. But I listened. I watched. I absorbed everything. The senior researchers spoke in jargon, but I learned to decode it. I started asking questions, smart ones. Ones that made them pause. Dr. Langley noticed. He didn't say much, but his glances grew sharper. I didn't care. I was finally part of something. One night, while cataloging compounds, I stumbled upon a formula that hadn't been tested. It was buried in an old notebook, scribbled in faded ink. I ran simulations, cross-referenced data, and proposed a hypothesis. The compound could accelerate cellular healing. I presented it to the lab supervisor. He raised an eyebrow. You think this works? I think it's worth testing. He gave me a nod. Run it. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting trials, documenting every result. The compound showed promise. Minor wounds healed faster. Inflammation reduced. It wasn't a miracle, but it was something. The university published my findings in their research bulletin. Suddenly, people who had ignored me wanted meetings. Professors asked for my input. Students quoted my paper. I was invited to speak at a seminar. Dr. Langley didn't attend. But he did something else. He submitted a paper with my data claiming joint authorship. I found out when a colleague congratulated me on our publication. I confronted him in the lab. You used my work. He didn't flinch. You used my lab. I held up my notebook. I have every timestamp, every entry, every test result. He shrugged. You won't win this. I didn't argue. I submitted a formal complaint, backed by documentation and witness statements. The university launched an inquiry. 2 weeks later they ruled in my favor. His name was removed from the paper. He never spoke to me again. But others did. They saw me now, not just as a student scraping by but as a researcher with potential. I was invited to join a special project team. I got access to better equipment, more resources, and a quiet desk in the corner of the lab. I still worked part-time. I still carried my torn backpack. But I walked differently now. Straighter. Stronger. One evening as I packed up my notes, Priya walked in with 2 cups of tea. You're glowing, she said. I smiled. I'm tired. He handed me a cup. You're building something. I can see it. I looked around the lab. The beakers, the charts, the quiet hum of machines. I nodded. In the shadows. She raised her cup. To the shadows then. Where the real work happens. We clinked cups. I took a sip, letting the warmth settle in my chest. I had come a long way from that chipped kitchen table. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The tea had gone cold in my cup, but I didn't move. Priya had left an hour ago and the lab was quiet now. Just the soft hum of the refrigeration unit and the occasional click of the ceiling fan. I sat at my desk, staring at the framed copy of my published research. The ink had faded slightly, but the title still made my chest tighten. Accelerated Cellular Healing Through Compound X47. It wasn't just a breakthrough. It was my proof. My fingerprint on the world. The next morning I stood outside my parents' house for the first time in 6 years. The gate was rusted, the paint chipped. I hesitated before ringing the bell. My mother opened the door, her eyes wide, hands still clutching a dish towel. She looked older, thinner. Her gaze flicked to my face, then down to my shoes. I'm here to invite you, I said. There's an award ceremony at the university. She didn't speak. Just nodded and stepped aside. My father sat in the living room watching the news. He didn't turn the volume down. I walked in, placed the extra ticket on the table and said, It's tomorrow. You can come if you want. He looked at the ticket, then at me. You're still at that place? I own part of it now, I said. He blinked but said nothing. I didn't stay long. The air felt heavy, like it hadn't been aired out in weeks. I left without touching the tea my mother had quietly placed on the table. Back at the university, the bidding war had begun. The research lab was being privatized and I wasn't the only one interested. A pharmaceutical company had deep pockets. A tech firm wanted to convert it into a data center. I had saved every penny, invested wisely, and partnered with a small biotech firm that believed in my work. The meetings were tense. Numbers were thrown around like confetti. I sat across from the university board, presenting my case with calm precision. I showed them projections, outlined future research, and emphasized the lab's legacy. I didn't smile. I didn't charm. I just told the truth. After weeks of negotiations, I received the call. You've won the bid, the voice said. The lab is yours. I went to sign the papers in a quiet office overlooking the campus. The pen felt heavier than it should. I signed my name slowly, deliberately. When I finished, I didn't smile. I just stared at the ink drying on the page. It was mine. The award ceremony was held in the same auditorium where I'd once sat with $12 in my pocket. This time I wore a tailored suit. My shoes shined. My hair was neatly tied back. The dean called my name and I walked to the stage, heart steady. Cameras flashed. The applause was loud. I shook the dean's hand, firm and confident. I turned to face the crowd. My parents were there standing near the back. My mother clutched her purse tightly. My father looked like he didn't know where to put his hands. My sister stood beside them, clapping with tears in her eyes. I stepped up to the microphone. The lights were bright, but I didn't squint. I spoke clearly, my voice steady. I wasn't supposed to be here, I began. At least that's what I was told. The room fell silent. I was told I couldn't afford college. That someone else deserved the chance more. I was told to stay behind. I paused, letting the words settle. But I didn't stay. I worked. I fought. I built something in the shadows. I thanked Mr. Patel, the bank clerk who believed in me. I thanked Priya, who saw me when no one else did. I thanked the library corner where I found my voice. I didn't mention my parents. But when I said, "Sometimes the ones who doubt you teach you how to rise," I looked straight at them. After the ceremony, people came up to congratulate me. Professors, students, even the dean. My parents didn't approach. My sister did. She hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "I know," I said. I drove home alone. The streets were quiet, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement. I parked outside my parents' house and walked up to the porch. I didn't ring the bell. I just placed a letter under the doormat. It was short. "I forgive you." But I never forgot. I didn't wait for a reply. The next morning I walked into the lab. My lab. The walls were the same, but everything felt different. I greeted the staff, checked the schedules, and reviewed the latest data. I had meetings lined up, proposals to approve, and a new team to mentor. But before all that, I walked to the back corner where I used to clean equipment and listen quietly. I stood there for a moment, remembering the girl with the torn backpack and tired eyes. Then I turned and walked to my office. There was work to do. A future to build. And a past I had finally conquered.